The title of my talk, as you can see, is the AI economy and the missing middle. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit, I think we've had a great start to the day with the buildup of the topics we talked about. But I'm going to talk a little bit about where is AI going and how do we get there, thinking about it from a business perspective and walk you through that. And I'll talk about these concepts as I go. But I'd take you back, step back 130 years to put this in context. 130 years ago, we were at the start of the age of electrification, and you had George Westinghouse and Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla competing to define the standards and the technology that would drive the power industry, the electricity industry. And that was 130 years ago, and at the time, nobody would have anticipated whole new industries being created, appliance industries. Nobody would have anticipated dramatic, massive changes in quality of life as we brought light and cooling technologies and many other things to the way we live, as it enabled computer technology and many other innovations. So just like back then, 130 years ago, we had the enabling technology and the start of a transformation, and you couldn't yet see where it was going to go. I think that's a good analogy to think about with artificial intelligence. We're right now laying the foundations. Innovators like Chetan and IPsoft and others working in the field are laying the foundation for artificial intelligence that stands to fundamentally transform the economy, as Nick was talking about to some extent earlier, and fundamentally change the way we work. And that's the lens through which we believe you need to look at it as you think about your business and your organization and where you drive it. And when we stepped back and looked at this, we found that nobody was really looking at the big macro impact of artificial intelligence. So we commissioned a research study with our Accenture research group and working with Frontier Research and economics firm. And we looked at the impact of AI over the next couple of decades and how it could stand to impact the economy and GDP. And we found some surprising results and optimistic results. You can see here, there's a whole report on this I can send you and a lot of detailed research. We believe AI has the potential to double annual growth in developed economies. In the US, this would add $8 trillion to US GDP. In countries like Germany, it would double GDP, adding a couple trillion. Massive impacts on economies around the world of artificial intelligence by transforming the way labor and capital work, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Also, tremendous impacts on labor productivity. And it depends on the nature of the workforce, the workers, the industrial distribution in a country, but it can boost labor productivity by up to 40%. Dramatic improvements. And this gets back to a question asked earlier. It's about how the technology and the people come together to drive these changes. But we think the more fundamental underlying impact here is that you need to think about economic growth differently. And there's now a lot of economic work going on this particular question, because when we think of GDP growth, when we think about economic growth, you tend to think about labor and capital predominantly is the way you think about it. We believe artificial intelligence is an important enough impact on the way way that work happens and business happens, that it's actually a new form of production in addition to labor and capital. Artificial intelligence and new ways of incorporating intelligence into the way our organizations work combined with the people adds a new element of production that we haven't had in the past. AI, artificial intelligence, can scale in a way that human labor doesn't scale, which is very linear. And AI also doesn't deteriorate like capital plant does. It in fact enhances in value as AI enhances and learns and appreciates in value over time. So we believe that fundamentally you have to look at AI much differently, both in economic analysis and the way you look at it within your business. And again, happy to send you the report on this. We're now drilling down and looking at the impact within specific industries. We believe in manufacturing-related industries that AI applied in the right way can drive an uplift of something like 6% in bottom line profitability as you extrapolate this down to an individual industry level, and that would add something like $4 trillion in gross value added to the manufacturing industry. So big numbers, big impact, but those are all just possibilities. We're not saying that will happen. We believe that could happen, but there's a number of things that you have to get right for that to happen, and that's what I'll talk about a little bit now. And we believe that what we're really getting into with artificial intelligence is fundamentally a third generation of work and a new generation of work. From a technology perspective, artificial intelligence is growing faster than anything I've seen in my career in technology. I've been working in the technology industry for over 3 decades, seen all the started on punch cards on mainframes, like some of you that are in IT probably did as well. Went through client server, global ERP, cloud computing, IoT that we just talked about. Nothing has scaled faster than artificial intelligence is scaling right now in business, in our business as we see it. In the variety of demand in different industries and different clients, the demand for our services, et cetera. Hundreds of projects underway with a variety of technologies, including great partners and early partners like the IPsoft team. But it's not about the technology. We believe it is about a new way of approaching work. And the way I define these 3 generations of work is the first generation was back around what I was talking about earlier, the early assembly line, when we first really tried to standardize work. If you remember the work of people like Frederick Taylor and then Henry Ford with assembly lines, it was about technology helping enhance, or technology replacing the physical impact of people, taking the hands, the work of the physical labor of people, and implementing that in manufacturing systems and the like. Think about the assembly line as the first generation of work. The second generation of work then happened at the end of the 1900s, when we had the first information revolution, really, where we had re-engineering the corporation, the idea that you could add information and systems as a resource to enhance the way work was done. And those of you in business at the time, we did all those things. We re-engineered our processes, looked at how to transform things, but it was still, if you think about our flow charts of re-engineering at the time, you had systems processes and you had human processes represented differently, and the two weren't really commingled. It was about how to separately apply technology and people for the most part, is what was in that second generation of work, which defines what we're still doing for the most part now. We believe in the third generation of work that we're just entering into. It's about how the human, the individual, it combines with technology into one real entity that you can leverage to really drive a different form of value and productivity and creativity in people. And this is a very positive impact, we believe, for people, and a positive impact for companies and organizations as you look to apply this. But it requires a new set of rules in terms of how you think about structuring your business. Just like re-engineering in the 90s required a very different set of rules about how you do business. And we believe that that's the key to unlocking the value of AI. Now, with the third generation of work, the first thing you start asking about is what's the impact on the jobs? The question John mentioned, he asked me when we first met many years ago. And we believe that the debate over jobs is misplaced, and we're arguing about the wrong thing most of the time when we have the debate about humans versus machines and where the jobs are going now, the jobs are going to go away. Because we're only looking at the polar extremes. We're looking at machines that are good at iterating, predicting, transacting, repetition, et cetera, on the one hand. We're looking at humans on the other end of a spectrum that are very good at improvising, creating, emoting, leading. And we're saying, where will the machines replace the people? And we believe that's the wrong debate to have, and it leads to a lot of the wrong conclusions. The real opportunity is in the middle of where people and machines come together, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, and cooperate and work together to drive a different form of work, a different form of output, and a different form of creativity in the arts and other disciplines. And if you look in the middle, that's where all the interesting stuff is happening, and that's where jobs are being created, and that's where the opportunity is for all of our organizations. And we see two categories of new jobs being enabled in the middle. There's one category of jobs that's all about people helping machines. People helping machines. And we don't think too much about those jobs, but there's massive opportunity for jobs of people helping machines. We divide it into trainers, explainers, and sustainers. 3 categories of new jobs for people that are needed to train the machines to operate in the right way. For example, we're doing projects right now where we need personality and emotional trainers and coaches for the AI we're developing. Because if AI defines the interaction, the way that the AI operates is the face of a company, becomes the brand of the company, becomes the expectation in the experience you set with the customer, So you need a training experience, just like you train people for, for the virtual agents and machines and robots, et cetera. Big categories of jobs. That's one example. We've listed out about 100 jobs that we believe exist in that category that are starting to be filled. The other half of that middle is machines helping people. And there's a lot of great examples of this. And we saw a great one yesterday with Amelia, for those of you that were doing the tour, where Amelia was coaching a human worker on how to properly follow financial compliance procedures, which are very complex. Great example of a person and a machine working together in a machine. In that case, Amelia, a very human machine, helping a person. Another great example is Autodesk Dreamcatcher, which is redefining engineering design, not replacing engineering designers, but enhancing them by allowing them to design much more creative and unanticipated objects in very different ways by using AI to enhance the design process. And those are just a couple examples of machines helping people be more effective and creative. And that missing middle is where I'd encourage all of you to think about your businesses and focus. And then how do you do that? So we think about 3 steps in the process that you need to think about for this third generation of work and redefining your company and thinking about these new roles in the missing middle. And the first here is reimagining business process. And we very intentionally use the word reimagining because we believe it's about really fundamentally rethinking strategy, business model, and how you operate. A good example of this that you see on the screen here is what Stitch Fix is doing in retail. How many of you know Stitch Fix and what they do? Some of you do. Stitch Fix has completely rethought the retail process. So if they're selling clothing, if you're interested in clothing, you just click on objects or pictures or characteristics of clothing you want, the kind of fit, the styles, etc. Machine learning extrapolates out the patterns, puts it in a crowdsourced exchange, makes it available to designers who can then customize clothing selections that are exactly what you want and ship them to you. What's interesting about that, it's better value for the consumer, very different process, disrupting the retail industry, creating new jobs for designers to interact with an AI-enabled crowdsourced platform to provide services to consumers, creating more, some of those new types of jobs in the middle that I just described through a very disruptive process. And this reimagining business process, we believe, it requires a lot of new disciplines and a lot of transformational thinking in terms of how we work in our organizations. The second rule then that we talk about is transforming the human-machine interface. And this is about thinking about new forms of interaction that allow us to get past the issues with the keyboard that Ergun just demonstrated for us. The keyboard isn't a great way of communicating. And most of us still use our thumbs to communicate with a supercomputer, which I think is a pathetic way for us to force all of us as humans to interact with technology. And there's unlimited opportunity to transform the human-machine interface, and Amelia is a fantastic example of that. We've seen some great examples. Another example I like to talk about is something we did for one of the largest manufacturers in the world, where we used an artificial intelligence-powered system with a mixed reality headset for their assembly line workers so that it could aid their assembly and understand what that worker was trying to do at any given point in time, feed in the best practice collectively from across the workforce on how to handle any individual task, learn the ability of the worker, and help up-level their skills very rapidly to work more effectively. So helping the worker learn faster, do more jobs, do more rewarding work, more safely, more productively, powered by learning system and learning algorithms at the heart of it. And that's the kind of opportunity to use technology and artificial intelligence to transform the way we work and really allow us as humans to interact at a cognitive level with machines rather than at a keyboard and physical input level. And then the third rule we talk about is lighting up dark data, which is about how do we leverage data and do unimagined things with the data in our organizations. And the example here that I'll talk about, and there's many examples, but a great one is work we're doing in the life sciences industry with a large company to reimagine their drug discovery process. So we're using the data that they have available to rethink genomic sequencing and how that would work using multi-level neural networks and a number of other techniques to take a lot of data they had on molecular compound characteristics along with the disease characteristics, tremendous information they had, and use a new form of AI system to use all that data that was previously really unusable to dramatically accelerate the drug discovery process by matching that information together in a very intelligent way. And that's the power of lighting up this dark data that many organizations have that you haven't been able to process currently with traditional approaches to information analytics and human processes. So those are 3 rules that we believe are the right rules to follow to get to, to this new world and open up these new possibilities. And I just end by saying that, as I said earlier, this is moving faster than anything I've ever seen things move. The destination is yet uncertain, which is the message of Nick Bostrom's message earlier. I think the best we can do now is look at the short term and the long term, and we believe that these are the kinds of rules we need to look at in our organizations to chart that course forward. And there's 3 things that we all, I think, need to think about differently as we do that. One is, from a leadership perspective, it requires some different leadership characteristics. And we believe that there's 2 things that are required in greater supply than we've needed before from at a leadership level. One is imagination, because this is about imagining what you can do and changing your business and providing different experiences for your customers and workers, and that's a different skill set than many organizations have had. And the second is a leadership skill set around responsibility and applying the technologies in a responsible way, because there's a lot of choices to be made in how to apply technology. And as we're seeing with a lot of stories in the press recently, there's a lot of bad choices you can make, not necessarily illegal, but bad choices. And there's a lot of good choices you can make. So how do you make the right choices to apply it in the right way as you go forward? So that's from the leadership characteristics around imagination and responsibility. We believe it's a big talent imperative, and we need to think about talent differently. And we need to make sure as organizations we're not thinking about our talent as an exhaustible resource that can be terminated when they're not needed anymore, but to think about them as a renewable resource where we have the right learning mechanisms in place, just like we have learning mechanisms for our AI machines, for our people as well, to enable lifelong learning so that people are keeping up with the technology in our organizations, our companies, and our communities. And taking a different view on talent is something we're embracing very much in Accenture. We believe that that's an obligation and a business imperative for organizations. And then the third thing that we believe is important is there needs to be a new level of dialogue between the private and public sector to make sure that the world happens and evolves in the right way. Because of the fact that the technology is moving faster than legal case law, faster than regulation, faster than policies, faster than governments can analyze it, it requires a new form of interaction, or we won't get anywhere close to the numbers I talked about earlier in terms of the impact, because we need to work through things in a very different way than we have in the past.